It's horrible. It's great. Brad Polumbo joins us to sort through this, co-founder of Base Politics, policy analyst with the Foundation for Economic Education. So, Brad, do you think that the Inflation Reduction Act will indeed, as it is intended, and as Manchin says, reduce inflation?
No, because it's not an Inflation Reduction Act at all. It's basically Build Back Better 2.0 with the same green energy subsidies and everything else that we saw the first time around. And, you know, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And calling something an Inflation Reduction Act doesn't mean it will actually reduce inflation. Its whole stated claim is that because it will reduce budget deficits by, if you make a bunch of very generous assumptions, $30 billion a year on average over the next decade, that will supposedly reduce inflation. But that does nothing to address monetary policy, printing money, which is the biggest cause of inflation. And unfortunately, it's little more than a rounding error on the actual $30.6 trillion national debt. So it's not going to make much of a difference. And also, you don't just have to take my word for it. The Wharton School of Business just came out with an analysis that found it will have a statistically insignificant impact on inflation. So there's so much for that.
As you just saw, the senator was, really hitting all these programs today, trying to get that message across. He says it'll help reduce inflation because it's going to reduce energy costs, reduce health care costs. Medicare is capped at $2,000, as well as help energy production with fossil fuels, too. What do you think happened? Why do you think he's changed his mind? Publicly, he said there's not as much spending in this bill as there was in the previous one. That's why he's on board.
Yeah, I mean, it is less spending, but it's still quite a lot. And I think maybe he just wants to use his kingmaker status while it lasts, because the Democrats are probably going to lose some power coming up in the midterm. But it's really sad because Senator Manchin was standing in the gap against Build Back Better, against wasting trillions of dollars. And now he seems to be going along with a light version of this, even though, you know, he's honestly betraying what he told constituents, because he said, I won't vote to raise your taxes. That's exactly what this plan does. It includes $315 billion in new corporate minimum tax. You can't say that your plan, between that and other provisions, will raise over $700 billion in new revenue, but then also out of the other side of your mouth tell us you're not raising taxes. That simply doesn't work. That's not how math works. So he's raising taxes on business and workers right as we start a recession. It's a terrible idea.
You know, talk about Washington speak. In one of the interviews, he pointed out that something like 55 Fortune 500 companies don't pay taxes, and this bill will require a 15% minimum tax for corporations. And he specifically said they're not increasing taxes. He said they're closing a loophole. So, I mean, do you buy that explanation from the senator?
No. No, I don't at all. You can't raise hundreds of billions of new dollars like you say you're going to without raising taxes. And let's be clear for a moment. When we say corporate taxes, they're formally leveled on corporations, but almost all economists agree that a huge chunk of the corporate tax is borne by workers through lower wages. That's something of a consensus. They quibble about the exact percentages, but everyone pretty much acknowledges corporate taxes hurt workers. So what he's really admitting to is hundreds of billions of tax hikes on American workers right as we enter a recession and are struggling with inflation. That's not building back better by any reasonable estimation.
You know, he also during these interviews talked about meeting in secret with Chuck Schumer. And they did that, he said, because he didn't want the drama. Well, guess who they're going to have to face now? Kyrsten Sinema. And she apparently was reading the whole thing on the plane back to Arizona for the weekend. What do you think is going to happen once she gets into this? Are they meeting a buzzsaw that they didn't realize when they came out shaking hands on this deal?
Well, I think so. You know, she's a Democrat, she's a moderate, but she's a pretty bold woman. And she said, I won't vote to raise taxes. So if she looks at this deal honestly, with everything, with the corporate tax increases, with funding the IRS to squeeze more nickels and dimes out of each one of us, she has to admit that that's what this is. It does include lots of tax increases. So she can kill this if she sticks to her word, and I'm hoping she will.
All right, we'll see what happens and see what her reaction will be. You know, it'll be front page news in the next couple of days. Brad Polumbo of the Foundation for Economic Education. Brad, thank you for joining us. Good to see you.